What would you do if, at your own son's wedding, his new mother-in-law stood up and called you a mistaken address, right in front of everyone? Most people would freeze. But what my son did next shocked the entire room, and the secret he revealed the next day destroyed their family forever. You won't believe how this story ends. Don't even think about skipping, because the biggest twist is still coming. You know, when you're a mother, you spend years imagining your child's wedding day. You picture the flowers, the music, the look on their face when they see their partner at the end of the aisle. You hope for a day filled with laughter, happy tears, and maybe a little bit of dancing, if your knees can handle it. But let me tell you, nothing in all my years of motherhood, or in all the wedding magazines I'd thumbed through, prepared me for the circus that was my son Ryan's wedding day. It started with a bang. Literally. I was standing in the church foyer, smoothing down my dress for the 100th time, when I heard a crash from the sanctuary. My heart leaped into my throat. Was it the cake? The flowers? Had someone tripped over the sound system? I peeked in, and there was little Lily, the flower girl, sprawled out in the middle of the aisle, her basket of petals scattered like confetti. Her mother was rushing over, heels clicking, while Lily just sat there, grinning as if she'd planned the whole thing for dramatic effect. I couldn't help but laugh. After all, what's a wedding without a little chaos? Then came the ring bearer, my nephew Mason, who was supposed to be the responsible one. He'd been practicing for weeks, walking up and down his hallway at home, clutching a pillow with 2 plastic rings tied on. But when the moment came, Mason froze. He looked out at the sea of faces, clutched the pillow to his chest, and then, poof, he was gone, darting under the pews like a squirrel. The rings, of course, went with him. It took 3 ushers and a bribe of 2 lollipops to coax him out. By the time he emerged, his hair was sticking up and his shirt was untucked, but he was grinning from ear to ear. I thought, well, at least he's having fun. And then there was my ex-husband, Tom. Now, Tom and I have been divorced for over a decade, but we've managed to stay civil for Ryan's sake. He's the kind of man who can fix a leaky faucet but can't remember his own birthday, let alone a dress code. So, of course, he showed up without a tie. He tried to play it off, saying he wanted to look relaxed and approachable. But I knew he'd just forgotten. I handed him a spare from my purse. Yes, I carry spare ties, don't judge. And he grumbled as he put it on. You always were the organized one, he muttered, and I just smiled. Some things never change. Despite the chaos, I was happy, truly happy. My son Ryan was about to marry the woman he loved. I'd watched him grow from a shy little boy who clung to my leg on the first day of kindergarten to a confident, kind-hearted man. He'd met Madison in college, and from the moment he brought her home, I could see the spark in his eyes. They were good together, at least that's what I thought. Madison was smart, funny, and had a way of making Ryan laugh like no one else. She'd call me sometimes, just to chat, and I'd started to think of her as the daughter I never had. But if I'm being honest, there was always a little voice in the back of my mind, whispering doubts. Not about Madison, but about her family. More specifically, her mother, Beverly. Now, I'm not one to judge. Heaven knows, I've had my own moments of being difficult. But Beverly had a reputation. She was the kind of woman who could walk into a room and make everyone feel like they were being graded. She had opinions on everything: the color of the tablecloths, the choice of wine, even the way I wore my hair. At the rehearsal dinner, she'd cornered me by the buffet and said, "You know, some people just aren't cut out for formal events." I wasn't sure if she meant me or the chicken, but I smiled and nodded, as you do. Still, I tried to keep an open mind. After all, weddings are about bringing families together, right? I told myself, what's the worst that could happen? Famous last words, I know. But I wanted to believe that, for Ryan's sake, we could all get along. I'd spent weeks picking out the perfect dress, something elegant, but not too flashy. I'd even let Madison help me choose the shoes, which pinched my toes but looked fabulous. I wanted everything to be perfect, or at least as close to perfect as real life allows. As the guests started to arrive, I took a deep breath and tried to soak it all in. The church was filled with the scent of fresh flowers, sunlight streaming through the stained glass, casting rainbow patterns on the pews. People were laughing, hugging, snapping photos. For a moment, I let myself believe that everything would go smoothly. I watched Ryan standing at the front with his best man, looking nervous but happy. He caught my eye and gave me a little wave, and my heart swelled with pride. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw Beverly making her entrance. She swept in like a queen, her dress sparkling, her hair perfectly coiffed. She glanced around, lips pursed, as if she were inspecting the troops. When she spotted me, she gave a tight smile and a little nod. I smiled back, determined not to let her rattle me. After all, today wasn't about us. It was about Ryan and Madison. The ceremony began, and for a while, everything was beautiful. The music played, the vows were heartfelt, and even Mason managed to deliver the rings without another disappearing act. I felt tears prick my eyes as Ryan and Madison exchanged their promises, their voices trembling with emotion. For a brief, shining moment, it felt like all the chaos and nerves had been worth it. But as we moved to the reception, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was brewing. Maybe it was the way Beverly kept glancing at me, or the way Madison seemed a little too eager to please her mother. Or maybe it was just the nerves, the sense that, in every family, there are undercurrents you can't always see. I tried to brush it off, to focus on the joy of the day. But deep down I knew sometimes, the real drama doesn't start until the cake is cut. And as I stood there, watching my son dance with his new wife, I couldn't help but wonder, was this the beginning of a beautiful new chapter or the calm before the storm? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain, this was a wedding none of us would ever forget. If you've ever been to a wedding reception, you know there's a certain magic in the air. The hard part is over, the vows have been said, and everyone is ready to eat, drink and dance like nobody's watching. The room was buzzing with laughter and clinking glasses, the kind of joyful noise that makes you forget all the little mishaps from earlier in the day. I was finally starting to relax, thinking maybe, just maybe, we'd made it through the storm. The tables were set with white linens and pink roses, the band was playing soft jazz, and Ryan and Madison looked radiant as they made their rounds, hugging relatives and posing for photos. I was chatting with my sister, feeling a little lighter, when I saw Beverly rise from her seat at the head table. Now, Beverly is not the type to blend into the background. She was wearing a sequined dress that sparkled every time she moved, and she had this way of commanding attention, like a general surveying her troops. She picked up her champagne glass and tapped it with her fork, the sound ringing out above the music. The room quieted, all eyes turning to her. I felt a little flutter of nerves, but I told myself, it's just a toast. What could go wrong? Sigh, if only I'd known. Beverly cleared her throat, her lips curling into a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I'd like to say a few words, she announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. I glanced at Ryan and Madison, who both smiled politely, though I noticed Ryan's jaw tighten just a bit. Beverly raised her glass, and for a split second, I hoped she might say something kind, something that would bring us all together. But then she looked straight at me, her eyes cold and sharp, and said, "That's not a mother. That's a mistaken address. I swear." You could have heard a pin drop. The laughter died instantly, replaced by a stunned silence that seemed to stretch on forever. My heart stopped. I felt the blood drain from my face, my hands trembling in my lap. For a moment, I thought I must have misheard her. Surely no one would say something so cruel so publicly, on such a special day. But the look on Beverly's face told me she meant every word. And then, to my utter disbelief, Madison, my future daughter-in-law, laughed. Not a nervous giggle, not a polite chuckle, but a loud, genuine laugh that echoed through the hall. She leaned into her mother, shaking her head as if they were sharing some private joke. I felt a wave of humiliation wash over me, hot and sharp, and I wanted nothing more than to disappear. Have you ever wanted the ground to swallow you whole? Because in that moment I was ready to dig my own hole with a salad fork and crawl right in. I glanced around the room, searching for a friendly face, but most people were staring at their plates, unsure of what to do. My sister squeezed my hand under the table, her eyes wide with shock and sympathy. I could see my ex-husband, Tom, looking like he wanted to say something, but not quite knowing how. The band had stopped playing, the servers had frozen mid-step, and even the children seemed to sense that something terrible had just happened. I tried to compose myself, to hold my head high and pretend I wasn't shattered inside. I thought about standing up, about saying something witty or cutting, but the words wouldn't come. I just sat there, feeling exposed and small, my cheeks burning with shame. I wondered if anyone would remember the beautiful ceremony, the heartfelt vows, or if this moment would be the only thing they talked about for years to come. But then something remarkable happened. Ryan, my sweet, gentle son, stood up. He didn't shout or make a scene. He just rose from his chair, tall and steady, and looked first at Madison, then at Beverly. His face was calm, but his eyes were blazing with a kind of quiet fury I'd never seen before. The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what he would do. He took a deep breath and said, "You can't respect my mother. You can't respect me. This wedding is off." His voice was clear and unwavering, cutting through the tension like a knife. For a moment, no one moved. Madison's smile faded, replaced by a look of shock and disbelief. Beverly's mouth fell open, her glass trembling in her hand. The guests gasped, some whispering, others just staring in stunned silence. And then, just like that, Ryan walked out. He didn't look back, didn't wait for anyone to follow. He just strode out of the reception hall, his shoulders squared, leaving a trail of stunned silence in his wake. The room exploded, half in shock, half in applause. Okay? Maybe just my sister clapping, but still, I sat there frozen, trying to process what had just happened. My son had just called off his own wedding in front of everyone, because someone insulted me. I felt a strange mix of emotions, pride, heartbreak, relief and fear all tangled together. Part of me wanted to run after him, to make sure he was okay, but another part of me was rooted to the spot. Overwhelmed by the enormity of what had just unfolded, I looked at Madison, who was now crying, her friends trying to comfort her. Beverly was fuming, her face red with anger, muttering under her breath about ungrateful children and ruined days. The rest of the guests were buzzing with whispers, some looking at me with sympathy, others with curiosity, as if I were the star of a reality TV show. Tom finally found his voice and came over to me, putting a hand on my shoulder. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice soft. I nodded, though I wasn't sure if it was true. I felt like I was floating outside my own body, watching the chaos unfold from a distance. My sister hugged me, whispering, "I did the right thing. You raised him well." I wanted to believe her, but all I could think about was the look on Ryan's face as he walked out, the pain and disappointment etched in every line. The rest of the evening was a blur. Some guests left quietly, others stayed, unsure of what to do. The band started playing again, trying to salvage the mood, but it was no use. The magic was gone, replaced by a heavy sense of loss and confusion. I found myself replaying Beverly's words over and over in my mind, wondering what I could have done differently, if I could have prevented this disaster. But as I sat there, surrounded by the wreckage of what was supposed to be a perfect day, I realized something important. Ryan had chosen respect over tradition, love over appearances. He'd stood up for me in a way I never expected, and in doing so, he'd shown everyone what kind of man he truly was. It wasn't the ending I'd hoped for, but maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning of something better. And as the night wore on, I found a small, stubborn spark of hope flickering inside me, refusing to be snuffed out by one woman's cruelty or one ruined wedding. Because sometimes, the most important moments in life are the ones that don't go according to plan. If you've ever lived through a family scandal, you know the day after is almost worse than the event itself. The morning after Ryan called off the wedding, I woke up feeling like I'd been run over by a truck. My head was pounding, my eyes were puffy, and my phone was already buzzing before I'd even had a chance to pour my first cup of coffee. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the sunlight streaming through the window, wondering if it had all been a bad dream. But the ache in my chest told me it was all too real. The phone rang off the hook. Some calls were from relatives who'd been at the wedding, their voices hushed and eager, wanting to know every detail. "Did you really say that to Beverly? Is Ryan okay? What happens now?" Others were from friends who'd heard the news through the grapevine. Because let's be honest, nothing travels faster than small-town gossip. There were messages of support too, from people I hadn't spoken to in years. "You raised a good man," one old friend wrote. "He did the right thing." I tried to answer everyone, but after a while, it all became a blur of voices and emotions. I just wanted to crawl back under the covers and hide from the world. But Ryan had other plans. Around noon, he came by the house, looking tired but determined. He hugged me tight, and for a moment, I thought he might break down. But he just squeezed my hand and said, "I have to do something, Mom. I need to talk to them." I knew exactly who he meant. I wanted to tell him to let it go, to move on, but I could see the resolve in his eyes. He needed closure, and maybe so did I. So off he went, still in his wrinkled suit from the night before, the engagement ring tucked in his pocket. I watched him drive away, my heart in my throat, praying he'd find the words he needed. I busied myself with chores, anything to keep my mind off what was happening. I vacuumed the living room twice, rearranged the pantry, and even tried to bake a pie. Though I was so distracted, I forgot the sugar. Let's just say, it was not my finest culinary moment. A couple of hours later, Ryan called. His voice was steady, but I could hear the exhaustion behind it. "It's done, Mom," he said. I went over there. I gave the ring back. He paused and I could picture him running a hand through his hair, the way he always did when he was stressed. I told them exactly how I felt. I told them family is about love and respect, and if they can't give that to you, they'll never have it from me. He told me Beverly had been sitting in her living room, surrounded by her sisters and a few close friends, all of them looking like they'd just bitten into a lemon. When Ryan handed Madison the ring, there was a moment of stunned silence. Madison started to cry, her hands shaking as she took the ring. Beverly, on the other hand, went pale as a ghost. She opened her mouth to say something, but before she could get a word out, she fainted. No, really. She swooned right onto her velvet couch, one hand pressed to her forehead like a character in a bad soap opera. I almost felt bad, almost. Ryan said the room erupted into chaos. Beverly's sisters rushed to her side, fanning her with napkins and dabbing her forehead with cold compresses. Madison's father just sat there staring at the floor, looking like he wanted to disappear. Ryan waited until Beverly came to, then repeated what he'd said. "If you can't respect my mother, you can't respect me. I won't be part of a family that treats people that way." He said. Madison tried to apologize, but he could see in her eyes that she didn't really understand. Maybe she never would. After Ryan left, the real fireworks began. Word spread through Madison's family like wildfire. Old wounds that had been buried for years came bubbling to the surface. Beverly's sisters started arguing about who was really to blame. Was it Beverly's sharp tongue, or Madison's laughter, or maybe the fact that nobody had ever stood up to Beverly before? Secrets came out, things that had been whispered about for years but never said aloud. One of Beverly's sisters confessed she'd always felt bullied by Beverly, another admitted she'd considered skipping the wedding altogether. Madison's father finally spoke up, saying he was tired of walking on eggshells. The whole family was in shambles, their perfect image shattered in a single afternoon. Meanwhile, back at my house, the phone kept ringing. Some people called to gossip, eager for every juicy detail. Did you see Beverly faint? What did Ryan say? Is it true he gave the ring back? Others called to offer support, their voices warm and kind. You did nothing wrong. One friend told me. You should be proud of your son. I tried to focus on the positive, but it was hard not to feel the sting of humiliation. I kept replaying Beverly's words in my mind, wondering if I could have handled things differently. But every time I started to doubt myself, I remembered the look on Ryan's face when he stood up for me. That was real. That was love. As the day wore on, I started to see things more clearly. Yes, the wedding was a disaster. Yes, my family was now the talk of the town. But in the middle of all that chaos, something beautiful had happened. Ryan had chosen respect over tradition, honesty over appearances. He'd shown me and everyone else what it means to stand up for the people you love. It wasn't the ending I'd hoped for, but maybe it was the one we needed. That night Ryan came home for dinner. We sat at the kitchen table, eating leftover chicken and laughing about my sugarless pie. For the first time in days, I felt a sense of peace. We talked about the future, about moving on, about finding happiness in unexpected places. Ryan said he didn't regret his decision, not for a second. I'd rather be alone than with people who don't respect my family, he said. I hugged him tight, feeling a wave of pride and relief. As for Beverly and her family, well, let's just say their Thanksgiving dinners will never be the same. The cracks that had always been there were now wide open, impossible to ignore. Maybe, in some strange way, Ryan's decision was a gift, a chance for them to face the truth and start healing. Or maybe they just keep pretending, sweeping everything under the rug. Either way, I knew we'd be okay. We had each other, and that was enough. Looking back, I realized that sometimes the most important moments in life are the ones that don't go according to plan. The ones that force us to stand up, speak out, and choose love over fear. And as I drifted off to sleep that night, I felt a quiet sense of hope, knowing that even in the midst of heartbreak, there's always a chance for a new beginning. Now, you might think this story ends in heartbreak, and I wouldn't blame you. After all, when a wedding falls apart so spectacularly, it's easy to imagine the aftermath as nothing but tears and regret. But life, as I've learned, has a funny way of surprising us when we least expect it. In the weeks that followed Ryan's decision to call off the wedding, our house was quieter, yes, but it was also filled with a new kind of peace. The phone calls slowed down, the gossip faded, and the world kept turning. I found myself with more time to think, to reflect, and to heal. And as the dust settled, something remarkable began to happen, not just for Ryan, but for me as well. At first, Ryan threw himself into work. He picked up extra shifts, started running again, and even took up cooking. Though his first attempt at lasagna was, let's just say, memorable for all the wrong reasons. We spent more evenings together, just the two of us, sharing stories and laughter over simple meals. I could see the pain in his eyes sometimes, the lingering hurt from what had happened, but I also saw a quiet strength growing in him. He didn't talk much about Madison or her family, and I didn't push. I knew he needed time to process, to grieve the future he'd imagined. But I also knew my son. He was resilient and he would find his way. As for me, I found myself reflecting on my own journey. For so long I'd tried to be the perfect mother, the perfect ex-wife, the perfect hostess. I'd worried about what people thought, about keeping the peace, about making everyone happy. But in the aftermath of the wedding, I realized that sometimes, standing up for yourself means letting go of what you thought you wanted. It means accepting that not everyone will like you, that not every story has a fairy tale ending. And that's okay. I started to embrace my own quirks, my own flaws, and to find joy in the little things. A good book, a walk in the park, a cup of tea on a rainy afternoon. Then, one sunny Saturday, everything changed. Ryan came home with a smile I hadn't seen in months. He was carrying a bouquet of wildflowers, messy, colorful, and absolutely beautiful. I met someone, he said, his eyes shining. My heart skipped a beat. I tried to play it cool, but I could feel the hope bubbling up inside me. Tell me everything, I said, and he did. Her name was Brooke, and she was nothing like Madison. She worked at the local animal shelter, loved hiking, and had a laugh that could light up a room. Ryan met her at a community fundraiser, where they'd both ended up volunteering to serve chili to a crowd of hungry neighbors. He said they'd bonded over a shared love of bad puns and a mutual inability to keep their aprons clean. She's real, Mom, he told me. She doesn't care about appearances or what other people think, she just is. I met Brooke a week later, and I knew right away that she was special. She greeted me with a warm hug, brought homemade cookies, and didn't bat an eye when our dog jumped up and left muddy paw prints on her jeans. We sat in the backyard sipping lemonade and swapping stories, and I felt an ease with her that I'd never felt with Madison or her family. Brooke asked about my life, my hobbies, even my failed attempts at baking. She listened, really listened, and I could see the way she looked at Ryan, with kindness, respect, and genuine affection. Over the next few months, Brooke became a regular part of our lives. She joined us for Sunday dinners, helped Ryan in the garden, and even convinced me to try yoga, which, for the record, is much harder than it looks. She didn't shy away from our family's quirks, she embraced them. When my sister came over and started telling embarrassing childhood stories, Brooke laughed right along with us. When Ryan burned the Thanksgiving turkey, she whipped up a batch of grilled cheese sandwiches and declared it the best holiday meal ever. She fit into our family not because she tried to be perfect, but because she was perfectly herself. Watching Ryan and Brooke together, I realized how much we'd both grown. Ryan had learned to set boundaries, to stand up for what mattered, and to choose love that was rooted in respect. I'd learned to let go of old expectations, to trust in the journey, and to open my heart to new possibilities. Our family wasn't perfect, whose is, but it was real and it was enough. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sun set, Ryan turned to me and said, "I'm glad things happened the way they did, Mom. I know it was hard, but I wouldn't change a thing." I squeezed his hand, feeling a wave of gratitude wash over me. "Me neither," I said. "Sometimes the best beginnings come from the hardest endings." As for Beverly and her family, well, I heard through the grapevine that things were still rocky. Thanksgiving dinners were tense, old wounds still raw. I felt a pang of sympathy for Madison, but I also knew that some lessons have to be learned the hard way. I hoped for her sake that she'd find her own path to happiness just as Ryan had. Looking back, I realized that life is full of unexpected twists and turns. We can't always control what happens, but we can choose how we respond. We can choose respect over tradition, love over appearances, and authenticity over perfection. And when we do, we open ourselves up to new beginnings, ones that are richer, deeper, and more meaningful than anything we could have planned. So, let me ask you, have you ever had to choose respect over tradition? Would you have done what my son did? Maybe you've faced your own crossroads, your own moments of truth. If so, I hope you found the courage to stand up for yourself, to let go of what no longer served you, and to embrace the messy, beautiful journey of life. As I sit here now, surrounded by family, friends, and the laughter that fills our home, I know that we are exactly where we're meant to be. Our story didn't end the way I expected, but it's better than I ever could have imagined. And if you're ever faced with a choice between fitting in and standing tall, I hope you'll remember our story and choose the path that honors your heart. Thank you for sharing this journey with me. If you enjoyed our story, don't forget to subscribe for more tales of love, laughter, and the lessons life throws our way. And remember, you're never a mistake in a dress. You're the main event, just as you are.